And this session is Art and Culture as a Life Hack. And today we'll have Robin Emmons doing an interview with Dasan Ahanu. And I'll let Robin introduce, I forgot. If you have we will be recording the session, and it's really, this recording will be for our use, our being the kind of the administrative side of OLLI. But remaining in this meeting, you are agreeing to the terms and giving due permission to share your contributions from the class. So that's our disclaimer. And we'll use the chat if you have questions, but actually we're a small group, so I'm certain we'll be open to just having, you're welcome to use chat, and we'll monitor to answer questions, but we'll also welcome having a dialogue or a discussion. So let's see, I have to move something around here. Okay, so again, welcome to Art and Culture as a Life Hack. Let me first introduce Robin Emmons. She's an award-winning social entrepreneur and consultant responsible for founding an early nonprofit that was part of a group who launched the local foods movement nationally. Robin is a Global Eisenhower Fellow, a 2013 CNN Hero, an alumna of the McCall Center Innovation Institute, and the William C. Friday Fellow for Human Relations. She holds a degree in political science and government relations from UNC Charlotte and is a native Bostonian, but now she's a proud resident of the Bull City. So thank you very much, Robin and Dasan, and I'll turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, and welcome everyone to Art and Culture is a Life Hack. We are so honored to have a local gem with us, Dasan Ahanu. He has a number of titles and accolades. He is an artist, an educator, a scholar, a community organizer. He is a slam poet. He has a rich background in spoken word. He has numerous recordings and has 3 published books of poetry. He is a resident artist with the St. Joseph Historic Foundation's Hayti Cultural Heritage Center here in Durham, North Carolina, where he has developed poetry and spoken word programming for youth and adults. He is co-founder and managing director of Black Poetry Theater, a Durham-based theater company that creates and produces original poetry and spoken word-based productions. In 2004, he was awarded an Indie Arts Award by Independent Weekly Magazine for his work in arts and activism. Then, impressively, in 2015, he was awarded the honor again, the first time in the award's history that has happened. Welcome, Dasan, and thank you so much for giving us your time and talent today.
Thank you. It's an honor. It's an honor to be here.
Mm-hmm. Well, Dasan, I am excited to jump right into this conversation, and I wanted to start off by asking you if you could explain to us what a hack is. That we have so many words that are creeping into our language. We're finding them all the time in our updated dictionary. So can you tell us what a hack is and how it applies to art and culture?
Well, when I think about a hack, it's sort of, well, first off, there is the idea of being able to kind of, when we think of hack, we think in terms of IT and computers and the idea of getting unauthorized access to something. But the other way to think about it is to cut into something. And so when I think about a hack, I think about a way to get around or get through something and to disrupt something. So in the idea of thinking about a life hack, these are things that can kind of help you get through life and get around certain barriers and obstacles, and can kind of help you disrupt some of the things that come with the lives that we lead. And so when I think about that, just a tool to add to the toolbox in terms of, being able to kind of navigate. And so that's what comes to mind for me when I think about hack.
Okay, so thank you for that, Hassan. So how has this idea of a hack in the space of art influenced your work and the way you do your activism and all of the slam poetry and the many things that you do? How have you utilized this notion in that way?
So for me, personally, art and culture has always been an outlet. It started for me as a personal outlet. I grew up an only child. My parents were young when they had me, and I am my mom's only child. My dad has had other children, but I grew up with them not together. My mom remarried and everything. So I grew up as an only child, and being that my mother had me young, keeping me occupied was a good thing. And I had a very overactive imagination. So luckily, my mom, my grandparents would just kind of give me room to kind of explore and just kind of feed me things. Everything from books to art supplies to anything that as I got older, they would let me put anything together that had instructions. So if they bought anything, so just kind of encouraged me to let my mind roam. And so that was something that I came to understand. There's always music in the house. My mom is a big person on music accompanying activities. So cleaning, cooking, everything was always about music. And growing up, it was all vinyl. And so so music became a big part of just what you got used to in the house. The same thing, and the music varied. Both my grandmothers were very much about the same thing. My dad's mom liked to be hip, so it would be the weirdest mix of music because she would try to keep up with things that I was listening to, as well as things that she grew up listening to. My mom's mom was a little bit more of soul, either soul or gospel. This is pretty much what you heard when you were there. And then my mom ran the gambit. And so there's music around. And so that came away from me. Mm-hmm. Growing up as the only child, really introverted, is how I started writing. I read a lot of books, and I preferred fantasy, mystery, things that will occupy my mind, but also give me an escape. Mm-hmm. And so if I wasn't reading, and then also the other thing that was kind of, I grabbed any books I found that belonged to any of the adults. So, I ended up reading all kinds. Harlequin romance and all kinds of things. So that was the first thing. So that for me was a way of me being able to be, not around any other kids and be able to kind of like create my own spaces. Growing up and then going through school, I got involved in other things, in sports and different activities. But I was in a magnet program. And so growing up, what happened was that I ended up at a middle school and high school that had a lot of activities, especially my high school, which invested a lot of money in performing arts. And still does to this day. Wow. And so state-of-the-art video production, a wonderful auditorium with stage and lighting, and they put on theatrical productions. Most of the city used that auditorium and that theater for talent shows and programs and things like that. So there were always things happening at my high school. And if my friends were involved, I would. I wouldn't do much by myself, but if my friends were involved, I would. So that meant that I got a chance to participate in a lot of different things because I had friends who sang and played music. We even at our school, when I was in high school, had an air guitar program that they did. They did 2 nights of performances. You auditioned. And for anyone who doesn't know what air guitar is, it's basically karaoke, choreographed karaoke. but we were like one of the only schools that allowed for students to put together their own performance routines to these popular songs, and you got judged, and you could win prizes, and they taped them and then sold the VHS tapes.
VHS.
Right, that's dating myself, but that was just an introduction for a lot of us. So what ended up happening for me is that when I went off to college, and by the time I came back home, that seed that got planted in a lot of us meant that I came back home to find that many of my classmates had went off to school and became, went to these college campuses and came back artists. They discovered themselves. They got to campuses that were heavy in the arts, found open mics, and found all of these avenues, and came back to Raleigh, North Carolina as artists.
Wow.
I didn't. I participated in all these things, and when I went off to school, because of all the kinds of things I was going through going into my adulthood, I kind of took a step back. Finding that out and being welcomed into this artist community, this kind of bohemian community that was growing, sort of pulled me out of where I was, but also kind of gave me this new life. And that's the life I've been living ever since. So that hack became a way of me kind of changing the trajectory of what was happening in my life. Mm-hmm. So then, since then, art and culture has been the way that I've navigated. And it's how I frame the world, it's how I see the world. It connected me to social justice. It connected me. It's been a connector because of the people that I've met. Mm-hmm. It kind of continually makes the lives that we live and tangible for me. And so that's why I look to it as a way of kind of being able to think about the world that we're in. It's a place that holds the feelings, the emotions, and the stories. And I think it's very important that when we think about ideas or theories and beliefs, those things can be very high. They can be very high level. But within the art, when you see the emotions, the feelings, and the stories, they become very tangible. And you get to see how these things affect people. And so for me, that's very important. Even as a teacher, I believe in experiential learning. I like to put my hands on things. I believe that anything becomes real when it can be put in practice. And so having a place where I see these things work means that I have my experiences and the experiences of those close to me, but through art, I can expand my understanding of people's experiences because I can get access to other people's experiences through their art. Mm-hmm. Which means that I can learn through them how life works and how it affects us and from different perspectives and vantage points. So that's just how this hack has impacted me. And so I try to just kind of take that and offer that back to people.
Yeah, thank you for that, Dasan. And I am of the generation of VHS too, so no shame in that. And I love that you kind of frame this hack around your exposure to music, writing, reading, performing arts, and relating that to the culture. And so I know that you are a lover of hip hop, and that of course is story that relates to culture. How can we, as just mere commoners that are not artistic in any way, so we think, how can we utilize this concept of hacking, of taking art and culture as a hack to get to the things that we love and to find more joy in our existence?
Yes, that's a very good question. And there's a couple of ways that I think about it. So the first thing is kind of is a level of openness. There's and art is a great place to kind of be open and vulnerable. One, you can navigate through it at your own pace, depending on what kind, you can navigate through it at your own pace. Even a performance is immediate, but the wonderful thing about that is that you can then, and I get asked all the time, is there a book? Is there a CD? Is there a DVD? Do you have anything recorded that I could, so you have the opportunity to be inspired by a performance, and then find out if there's a way to sit with more of that performance work so that you can kind of, sit with it and navigate at your own pace. Artwork Are there prints, reproductions? Am I buying this painting and taking it home with me so I can continue to engage with it? Is it, is there a website? Like, the presence of art allows you to navigate it at your own speed. How much art you take in is up to you as well. How many exhibitions are you going to? How many Broadway shows? How many live music performances? So you have control over how you navigate it. The key is being open. Being open to the inspiration. And I think a lot of us are, we kind of understand the concept of art being inspirational and motivational and touching, but you also have to be open to the challenge, because some of it is going to challenge your values, challenge your beliefs, which we shouldn't be defensive about, because even if it's contrary, doesn't mean that it's an attack on our position. It's just a beginning of a conversation that should either push you to rethink or affirm you, because your response gives you a chance to really reflect on how you got to where you are, and a chance to kind of like shore up that, like, this is why I believe what I believe. It can give you something to go back to look to. Like, I don't agree, but I hadn't thought about this, so let me go sit with this for a moment, and it can lead you to the other conversation. Like, there's more to it than dismissal or distancing if you're open to it. So there's the openness, and it just puts us in tune with the variety of conversations that are happening around us. You may have a particular position on something and able to engage with art and realize that you hadn't considered a particular perspective. So it's not that your thinking is wrong. It's just there's more to learn, right? And then once you have an opportunity to learn, now you have something else to consider and think about and kind of like dig into. So that openness is the first thing. And it can get addictive, which can inspire you, that feeling of being, opened up and just being fed in these new ways can lead you to engage. So if you're a person who loves music, if you really just kind of sit and open up, you'll find, because many artists are inspired by other artists. So then if you kind of just open yourself up, that new band, that new artist, that performance may lead you to a piece of art, which then may lead you to a book. But then, even today, there are movements of artists who are contemporaries of each other, and you can kind of follow a trail that can really kind of guide you. So that leads to the second thing, which is curious exploration. We got to get curious again. And as we get older, we sort of get settled into our routines, just because that's the nature of life. It's easier to navigate when you can order and structure and schedule things so that you can balance all the responsibilities that we have. Every once in a while, art allows us to disrupt that. For the moment that we're with that art, we can set aside those things, and we can just be curious again and start to explore and imagine and wonder. And one of the also great things about that is if we do that through the context of art, we don't have to worry about judgment. There are times where I could be like, I just need a couple hours just to think, and can get judged for it, especially given the amount of responsibility that I have. I could say that I'm going to go see a show or going to an exhibit, and while I'm walking through that exhibit, I'm doing the same thinking and imagining and dreaming, but I'm going to an exhibit, so folks are like, oh, well, cool. Those 2 hours weren't wasted. You did a thing. And I'm like, yeah, I did a thing so I could escape from y'all. So but that idea that art is a destination and an excursion allows people, even reading a book, like you could take 2 hours and folks will think that you just, wasted 2 hours because you didn't do a thing. But if you're saying that you sat with a book, or you watched a film, these things kind of ease the expectation from those around you, and they'll give you room.
Yeah.
So that helps. The other thing is that what I think that those first two things can do is just get you to a place where you can become comfortable imagining again. The value, one of the values of art, and it's a big part of my work, whether I'm in a creative space, in a community space, or social justice space, or educational space, I have the same conversation because it translates. So like if you're in a business space, we have this conversation about mission and vision and goals and outcomes, benchmarks, all these kinds of terms that have become a part of our like adult responsible life. Well, in art, the same thing, we have what we create becomes a vision of what's possible, a vision of what has happened, what can be, what could be, what has been, that kind of can inform the way we think about things and the way we move. So if they say that in order to be able to navigate, you should have a vision, which is what you expect to accomplish or what it looks like, and then your mission is how you're going to move about it, and that having that vision means you know when you've accomplished what you're set out to do. What art kind of helps us to understand is, what does it mean to have a vision, right? And so it's why, you know, there can be songs or pieces of art that we look to that remind us of our purpose or what we're trying to accomplish, is because that art takes us to that vision, and then that vision lets us know how far we've come and how far we have to go, and reminds us of why we're doing this in the first place. So being able to get back into that place of imagining kind of puts us in this place of this ongoing kind of interrogation, which isn't a negative thing. Interrogation is a healthy kind of reflection and adjusting and adapting. Kind of puts us back in a healthy way back into our own minds to think about what we're doing. And so that's a big part of it. And so one of the other things is, if you have an opportunity to create. Now, this part is not for everyone. It's up to you. I mean, not everybody feels comfortable creating, you know? So there's some anxiety around creating. But
not all creatives. Not for everybody.
Right. So there's an interesting thing that I'm always keep in mind. One is that everybody can be creative. Not everyone is a creative. And I think that helps ease some of the anxiety and some of the worry. Because being or claiming, I used to have conversations with folks who wrote poetry but would not call themselves a poet. And it took me a while until I started to understand that what they were distancing themselves from was not about them. It was about other people. They were distancing themselves from the responsibility and expectation. I write poetry as an outlet. To call myself a poet immediately means that people are going to expect the thing from me. And I'm not getting ready to give you that. So I write poetry, but I'm not a poet. And so with that, the ability to be creative means that you can have these moments of creativity. To call yourself a creative is to accept the responsibility for being creative. And when you're not in a place to be creative or want to be creative, or you don't want to be looked to give a creative response, then you watch out for that. So those of us who are creatives have accepted that when we show up, the expectation for us is that we're who you would look to for a creative idea or response, and we're okay with that. So with that, creation can be in a number of different forms. So you can give yourself room to try and practice, and not have it be well defined or anything. So you can create a recipe. You can create. There's so many ways to create.
So that's
and there's a spectrum and a continuum. Yeah, right. That's the hack.
That's the hack.
Create.
So you can do it without the complexity or rigidity around it, without the judgment and putting a label on it, and still create, right? And so how do we get there? There's a question for us. Someone is asking, can you talk about how to overcome fear of doing art, and a little bit about what stops us? So I always have a conversation. I'll start with this thing about writer's block. My students always tell me about writer's block, and I tell them I don't believe in it. And they look at me strange, and because writer's block is a thing,
but I say that I don't believe in it and it doesn't exist for a particular reason.
Mm-hmm.
What I believe happens is there's a thing about not the ability to do something, about the ability to do it in a particular way.
Mm.
So when I start to have a conversation, I'm like, you can write, but you can't, but what's frustrating you is you can't write what you're trying to write.
Mm. Right.
It becomes, I can't write because you can't write what you're trying to write. And so you're just like, I can't do this. I can't, it won't come. No, what you want to come won't come. And so there's the idea of, there's two things. There's this muse that we have romanticized and we think is like the whole of creating. But there's also just the act of creating something that is also a part of it. And so I think when you come, the fear, you can remove the fear by being okay with just the practice of creating something and knowing that whatever you have control over what happens with whatever you create. For me, what that does is it allows to say that you can create something for no reason and it's fine. You can be inspired and create something and it's fine. You can create something because you need an outlet. And all of those things live with you. Nobody has an expectation or will see it unless you choose to. And then you get to decide how much of that anybody sees, what way or shape they see. And so then we start to move forward into like what it really means to think about creating art. Mm-hmm. That first step is for you. When you start to think about how you want it to look or shape, that's when you can start to look for, you can start to read and examine other artists and other people who've created and technique and all of style and all these things. And that's step two. And then you can think about, okay, so what does it look like for me to refine my own craft and creation? And then what does it mean to share? But there's steps to that. And so if you remember that, then there's no fear in just exploring and playing. When we were kids, we had that sense of wonder and we just played.
Right.
Over the years, the literal world that we exist in put so much pressure and so it's immediacy on the decisions and choices that we make. We don't get room, but there's room to play. And then you can decide whether that play becomes anything. So that anxiety, there's a step before the anxiety matters. And we just got to remember that there's room. And then we can decide whether we want to embrace that anxiety or fear. Because even after all these years, I have a fear about what I create and share. It's a reminder that it still matters. I was told by elder artists that when the fear and anxiety goes away, that I need to rethink what I'm doing because I'm way too comfortable. And I've lost touch with why I do what I do. So it doesn't go away. It's just that there is a place for everyone before it starts to matter. Yeah. That exists for everyone. And so that's where you can kind of like live. So then with that, the last kind of part of the hack is to you don't have to do this, but if you get comfortable with sharing, and you can share with whoever, best friend, your partner, your kids, but there is a conversation to be had. There's an experience, personal experience of sharing that completes that process. But there's also a way to be able to have conversations that you might not otherwise be able to have. So as a hack, the sharing of a thing can be a very great way to be able to cut through moments of tension, of worry, of concern, of hesitation that you wouldn't otherwise be able to. When I was working with Duke Center for Documentary Studies, when they first started their documentary certificate program, I did a documentary writing class. Most of the folks who took the class were really dealing with family artifacts of folks, the family artifacts, things of folks who passed. They were all navigating emotions and personal stories and things that they just were trying to really unpack and deal with in their life. And what I provided them was a way to frame their thoughts so that they could then share with their family and with other folks, and feel comfortable enough that they were in a place to be able to have a conversation about these things that meant so much. So it was about putting them in a place to feel comfortable enough and strong enough to share. But the sharing was the ending of that catharsis that started with them finding it, sitting with it, creating and, honing their thoughts. And then the final step was, I'm going to share this, and let's heal and grow and remember and laugh and cry, but I want to do this with these things. So that's the hack of it all, is, to be open, to have a chance to be open, to explore, to imagine, create in the ways that you can, and then if you feel comfortable to share, and then just keep doing it. And there's always an artistic reminder of how valuable that process can be.
Sure, sure. I love that you make the distinction between the mere act and the act with a muse. You can have that act and it still be meaningful without having the muse and the audience that you're ready to display it to. So that is so incredibly helpful and powerful. Thank you, Dasan. So, Dasan, how does this notion of utilizing the hack in arts and culture contribute to our movement as a society? How do we move forward using these elements of a shortcut to accessing that artistic piece of ourselves that makes us look at a piece of art or listen to a piece of music that changes our perspectives and makes us curious in the ways you described?
The restoration of curiosity takes us back to that sense and place of wonder, which in discovery. It makes us comfortable with difference. What we're seeing is as a way to move us forward through a lot of difficult moments and a lot of tension, historical, community-wise, so like in all of the intersections, class, identity, is to create this space where we don't look at the differences. We look at ourselves as sort of a homogeneous whole. Mm-hmm. What we're finding is that's a very difficult thing. And one of the reasons why it's difficult is that there's a lot to unpack and reconcile and heal from and grow from that we don't get a chance to do when you do that. You're just walking people into a space where they have to kind of just ignore what they're carrying into the space and exist in this new space that there is no transition for. If you restore the curiosity and wonder and discovery, then you can appreciate difference. And then you can, if everyone gets to be appreciated as difference, however they're different, then everyone just gets to be, and you get to, it's not homogenous because everybody doesn't have to, think the same or be seen the same, but it is collective, that everybody just gets to be, right? So what happens is, if you think about an art exhibit with various artists, the styles are different, the colors are different, the tone, the technique, all of those are different. But when we walk through the exhibit, we leave the exhibit saying that the exhibition was amazing, right? We walk through it and we don't feel a tension about the variety of art. We don't, difference can exist. It's called an exhibit, right. It's called a thing, right? It exists in the same space. It's open and available and accessible to everyone who enters the space, and everyone comes into the space, has their feelings about the space, however, each piece of art, however, and they leave. But when they leave, they have a respect and appreciation for the entirety of the collection, however they feel about each piece, whether they like the thing or disliked it or were, thrown off by it, whatever. And they can handle both. Like, they can handle a appreciation of the whole and their feelings about each individual piece at the same time. Replace that with people, and suddenly then all of a sudden it gets awry. So for me, I think that what happens with what we can find in art, and it happens even in performing arts, you can have performers of different, I've been in this place where you can have performances of so many backgrounds take a stage, and all of our experiences can be in conversation. And there can be an audience of people who either agree or not agree with us, but at the end of that thing, they will appreciate the brilliance of the performance and continue to have conversations about what touched them, what moved them, what challenged them, what they liked, disliked, but leave both with how they feel about things individually, but also an appreciation for the whole and appreciation for the artists and their talent and abilities. we have models for what that looks like.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that is important to me about art and culture. And why I feel like wherever there is art, in the midst of all the other things that we learn and experience and believe, you're going to see a group of people in a community that thrives a little better, because you're still rooted in what that is. So these hacks, I learned in some of my research and learning that radical transformation is redemptive and revolutionary, according to sociologists. What that means is it's individual and collective. So if the individual transforms, then inherently all of the transformation of the individuals transforms the group. And that's what I think this is. These hacks can help you individually, but what that means is it means you move through the community different. So then there's an effect and an impact on the group.
Yes.
So that's the value. And as artists, we learn that because our intent with our art is to create and then offer it. And so our art has taken us through so many different communities and has shaped us in so many ways that we know what that is like. But you don't have to be an artist to have that experience. Through art, whether you create it or just make sure it's a part of your life, can give you a sense of what we know to be a very real and tangible thing.
So with that rich perspective and the way you move through the world and the various spaces that you find yourself in intentionally design, what inspires you to write poetry? How do you do it?
So I am one of the nosiest person ever. I grew up very curious. So, and my family would say that I was very mischievous and loved to ramble. I was the poster child for like child locks and putting stuff on high shelves, because I would just ramble through everything and find things I had no business finding. I've always been that way. So, and I also grew up, my mom was 16 when she had me, so I grew up, and she was the oldest of four girls in the house, 5 children, but my uncle lived, my grandfather, all the girls were with my grandmother when they split. But what that meant was I grew up for a very long time without any other kids in the house and around both adults and folks who were becoming adults. I was always around older folks. So I started to learn what it meant to be a watcher and a listener. And so life inspires me. Most of my poetry comes from the conversations I have, the experiences I have, and the things that I see and notice or intentionally make sure I notice around me. I became more in tune with that when I started really studying. William S. Burroughs, who I really love, was big on observation. And he talked about how much of life we come to take for granted, which means we come to overlook it. That we can go to the same place 3 or 4 different times and notice something we never noticed before. So I really try to pay attention. And so that ends up informing my work. The other thing that inspires me is I'm a big puzzle person. So I love to dissect things and then like see what happens when you kind of like take things apart and see how they can fit together in new ways. So that's why I'm so big on like practical application and experiential learning and curiosity and wonder, because that's just how I came to understand things. And so that's what moves me. I'll see something, I'll overhear a conversation, I'll hear a statement, I don't even have to hear what's going on, but I'll see 2 people and wonder about what conversation or how, and then so now there's a story running in my mind.
Right.
And so that becomes the basis for another poem, because I'm like, what was I watching, or what could it be? I don't know. I couldn't figure it out. But so then what could it be? Sure. And so those kinds of things are the kinds of things that kind of become the basis for my poetry. And then I'm Southern. And Southern folks love to spin a yarn, you know? Nobody loves to see anything directly.
Understood.
And my close friends I have friends who say that I talk in parables or anecdotes. I never say anything directly. Even my mentees and students are notorious for telling me that I don't ever answer a question directly. But I just grew up in this Southern country space where, you know, if you ask a straightforward question and you get a story. and, and so you just get used to that kind of colloquialism and kind of, that kind of narrative kind of thing. So, and, my family is part of my family's from Eastern North Carolina. And then the other half of my family is from the Wake Forest, Roseville area, which is where the actual plantation where my family kind of left from. And their family name is the actual name of the plantation. They took that name on. So, I'm North Carolina born and bred, and just being around that there's just that southernness kind of informs the rhythm and pacing and the narrative nature of my work.
Thank you for that. Just, oh my God, so rich. Well, I think we are at time, but I want to open it up to the OLLI participants to see if there are any additional questions before we have a final few words. And if you do, you can
Hey, can we invite Dasan? Are you willing to give us a reading or a performance or something that you've created?
A small piece
Sure.
spoken word, please. That would
Was at the end.
So in that this particular piece is really inspired by 9th Street. I've changed, just kind of recontextualized the artist, but it was inspired by a musician who used to sit in front of the 24-hour laundromat and play right by Bonds, and between Bonds and International Delights. And so that's what led me to this poem, and also the experience of teaching at Duke Young Writers Camp and how excited each summer the kids would be to go to 9th Street and people watch and talk to people on the street. And of course, for a variety of different reasons, just being concerned about having kids, especially kids from other places, and their perception of some of the folks on 9th Street, because there would be street artists and a variety of folks, and wondering, and honestly, some of those kids were more considerate, understanding, and kind to those folks on 9th Street than some of the adults. And I realized that it was because they were writers. So what they saw in those folks was something different than everyone else did. And they saw life, they saw nuance, they saw these things, and they would love to go to 9th Street and just sit. And so that led me to this piece. It's called The Artist. There's an old man wearing a Technicolor dream coat sitting at a street corner named Desire on a bench outside of an old laundromat. He has a cardboard sign that reads, "Before and after," is playing a banjo, covered in superhero band-aids. His once full head of hair is now broken homes and bulimia, tattered rainforest down his cheek, eyes Caribbean blue, skin commercial beach. You would think him all of society's transgressions until you see him smile, all Sunday choir robe clean. He speaks in staccato. His lips are the Nicholas brothers. The words he offers are stormy weather dancing, spoken in syncopation to the fleeting optimism in his spirit. I want to give him a couple of dollars. He wants to give me a couple pieces of advice. I say it's a fair trade. I bartered my time for worse. I expect a story. What I get is a revelation. He asks me what I do. I say that I'm a poet, and he laughs, and then rises from that bench like Suleiman rising from a collapsing throne in Constantinople, places Marion Barry and Clarence Thomas in front of me. His knees are a little shaky. He reaches into the noose holding his black pants up, pulls out a plastic flower, and he hands it to me. We want our roses while we can still smell them, but if they're fake, it's sort of like intention with no fruition, like dreams with no ambition. What good is appreciation if it's not real? But then again, sitcoms have laugh tracks. After enough episodes, do you wonder if you were really funny? Or do you become content knowing that there will always be laughter? His hands dance. Fingers like the Temptations and the Spinners. His left forefinger had been broken before. That's when I noticed that David Ruffin had trouble keeping up the steps, probably from holding the truth, the ability to point out other people's mistakes. He reached into his coat pocket. He pulled out an old watch, 14 karat, covered in forgotten currency, sunburnt, with a broken jaw and arms stuck in an empty embrace. We've all had our face cracked, been ashamed, embarrassed, had our reputation tarnished by bad decisions, been stuck in a moment, unable to see that times have changed, but we're all made of valuable material, and 2 times a day we're perfect, so there is always hope. So now I'm standing there, looking at a false promise and a missed opportunity with a look on my face as blank as Herman Cain's NAACP application. And I'm looking at this juke joint scamp playing a rug band rendition of Ragtime in his belly. I'm so confused, yet I'm so aware. I give them back, but I can't. He knows that. Knows that there are no refunds, no exchanges. These symbols, they've already begun to be used, and his composition has already begun to be written. See, he taught me about judgment, about finding blessings where you least expect to find them, about recognizing that sometimes wisdom comes when everything crumbles around you. So in honor of this ill-gotten ghostwriter, whenever I deliver this poem, I make sure that everyone knows which one of us actually wrote it, the artist.
Oh, thank you. That was amazing. Thank you so much. It has been such an honor to talk with you. I am looking so forward to continuing the conversation on and offline. And Beth, I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. This was very fascinating and really gave me a lot to think about. So thank you for participating today, and really look forward to, are you coming back in the fall for in the fall session? So that'll be, look forward to that. But thank you so much. And if you're willing, I invite other people to say goodbye or ask a question, to have a little bit more of a conversation, to pick up on any points that you want to ask Robin or Dasan about. And there were a lot of things that I read in your bio that we didn't learn more about, but so you have a very fascinating background and activities going on, and have created a lot of sounds like community opportunities, like establishing different forums or theaters.
Dasan, can you talk a bit about your class and the work that you do at Hayti? And is that open to adults and young people?
Yes, so I've been working with the Hayti since 2004, and we do right now. What we do is we do a monthly poetry workshop, which happens every second Monday. We actually have just we're working on that being virtual. We just brought that back for June, and we'll continue on doing that virtually, and that you can find out about that and the monthly poetry slam, which we're working on bringing that into a virtual space. BullCityPoetrySlam.com is the website, or it'll be up on the Hayti's website as well. So that's part of the poetry program that we offer. That's regular, and then the theater company does original poetry and spoken word based theatrical productions, and we've been doing 4 small shows. This year we'll probably move to doing 3 for this upcoming season. And also seeing about, being able to create some space for having some conversations around how folks can turn some of these thoughts and ideas into some theatrical productions, just have some workshop space. But that's primarily, I've worked with the Hayti to do some youth programming and some adult programming. And so as we move along, I'm always willing to kind of envision with them how to hold space for folks who want to write and create, and also to learn how to share. There's the anxiety over sharing their work, and so that's part of that I'm looking to do. And so that's what I've been doing with the Hayti. That's been the main hub for workshops, and then collaborating with other organizations, kind of to speak to the folks that are in their network. In terms of helping them kind of develop some programming.
Wonderful, thank you. And it is, I must note, since we're talking about Hayti momentarily, June is Black Music Month. So check out Hayti on their YouTube channel for something that will bless your soul, as we say in the South. Thank you so much, Dasan. Any other last
Thank
remarks
you.
as we
Thank
say
you.
goodbye?
Thank you. Thanks so
Got
much.
a lot of people coming in saying it was great. They really appreciated it. I really enjoyed the poem at the end. You gave that with a lot of feeling, and that was really special. So again, thank you. And